Hello. In today's lecture we are going to be looking at Kafka's Metamorphosis. Kafka's work has given rise to nightmarish scenarios that have often been referred to by the term Kafkaesque. Psychologically, Kafka explores the unpleasant and pathological features of modern society. His novel The Trial throws the reader into a labyrinth world associated with modern bureaucracy. Unlike earlier readers we've looked at this semester, like Gogol and Chekhov, he does not aim at satire or parody, or at least not only satire and parody. Rather, he aims to unsettle and indeed to disturb. And these, I think, are his central aims. He focuses on unsettling and disturbing the reader in a way that previous authors that we've looked at this semester, at least Gogol and Chekhov, haven't. As I think we see some of this also happening in Blake as well. But Gogol really, Kafka really focuses on this tendency to unsettle. In Metamorphosis, he explores the anxieties and absurdities of his contemporary urban society. As a German-speaking Jew in Catholic Czech-speaking Prague, Prague was a particularly important center for the Jewish Enlightenment. Kafka was always on the outside in many ways. And I think being on the margins of society, often this is where you find creativity on the margins of society. And the Jewish community, particularly in the former Habsburg Empire, was particularly creative at this time. We've looked at the Srebrenost, or the Silver Age in Russian literature, over the previous 3 weeks. Now we're looking at another kind of Silver Age. This is a kind of a Silver Age almost of the Jewish Enlightenment in the Habsburg or Central European world, early 20th century. I came across this world of Jewish intellectual thought primarily through my work on Karl Popper, so through the philosophy of science more. However, I progressively delved more into this intellectual world and found all sorts of interactions between the various Haskalic or Enlightenment centers throughout the former Habsburg Empire and Poland. And Kafka's really exemplifies this kind of intellectual tradition, and his thought reflects the kind of he's a product of this tradition. There would not have been any secular, non-observant Jewish intellectuals in this part of the world if it weren't for the earlier Jewish Enlightenment and the Haskalah that opened the way for this kind of social strata. So one sense Kafka wasn't observant. Another sense he read a lot of Jewish mysticism, Martin Buber, for example. So I think it's hard to dismiss the Jewish aspect to his thought, both in terms of his social context, but also the intellectual legacy that gave rise to him. Okay. Another important point is that these Jewish intellectuals of the former Habsburg domains found themselves increasingly vulnerable after the First World War. With the end of the multinational Habsburg Empire, which famously the Kaiser could speak all the languages of, there was a rise in nationalism in these countries, in Poland and Czechoslovakia, in Austria, in Hungary, and this increasingly marginalized the Jewish community there, or the Jewish communities there, and with the new, and particularly with National Socialism, these communities went from marginalized to outright persecuted. And I think some of that sense of marginalization, persecuted, not that sense of being utterly alienated from the social world around you, comes out in Kafka, comes out in Metamorphosis. The character who's Gregor, who's ultimately alienated from his own family. That same sort of sense of alienation comes in. He's absolutely alone. And I think in an era of the pandemic, writers of sort of alienation in intimate locations like the family home, these are important themes to be attending to. In a strange way, Kafka, like other authors that we have looked at, was disturbingly prophetic in his vision. The famous opening lines to the story of Metamorphosis go like this. When Gregor Samsa woke on the morning from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed right there in his bed into some sort of monstrous insect. I mean, from these opening lines, you would almost think that this is almost a kind of a light-hearted sort of almost there's something whimsical of the opening line, something so casual and whimsical. But the story is not casual and whimsical. We'll say that it's thoroughly disturbing. But you wouldn't get that from the casual opening lines to it. Okay. The German word, why I say it's prophetic, is because the German word here is not just insect, but rather vermin, which, following the, in Nazi propaganda, Jews, gypsies, and other undesirables were referred to as vermin. So I think this is where there's the strange aspect of prophecy coming in. We might read into this transformation of Gregor Samsa into vermin as an anticipatory consciousness of the transformed status, if not fact, of the European Jewish community. So European Jewish community and European Jewry, as a result of Nazi propaganda, were treated as vermin. The German population were encouraged to see Jews in their community as vermin that needed to be gotten rid of. So that particular word, that particular term, vermin, it has a lot of sedimentation coming after Kafka as a result of Nazi usages and a result of the implications of that for the utter destruction of the Jewish community. So I think there's something, waking up and finding oneself regarded as vermin is something that Jews all around Nazi-occupied Europe would have found themselves. They would have seen the propaganda signs above the streets, in the shops. And that's how the neighbours and others would have started to treat them. And they were eventually exterminated like vermin. This Gregor Samsa waking up and experiencing himself vermin has something of anticipating that horrid reality that would come. And in this way, I think authors have a strange way of being, the great authors at least, have a strange way of being prophetic. And this was, in a sense, one of Kafka's prophecies. I mean, let's turn now to the character of Gregor Samsa. We're introduced to Gregor as a travelling salesman. This is a low-status job he's been forced into taking to support his family as a result of the economic situation at the end of the First World War. It seems that he's constantly under the whip by his supervisors, by his boss. I will say, in modern language, he was under strict KPIs, and suffered from anxiety resulting from those having to meet those KPIs. So in this sense, he was thoroughly modern. He can speak to anyone in the workplace today. We see, however, from a photo in his bedroom, of Gregor standing, looking elegant in his military uniform. Elegant and proud in his military uniform, revealing a former higher status, the status that soldiers received, even soldiers of a low social status. Once you wear the uniform, given a sense of purpose, mission, this sense of status was something that soldiers felt, at least going into the First World War, before actually the fighting started. And so there's a sense that Gregor, in a previous life, was a proud man, dressed nicely, presented himself in a way befitting of the uniform with the saber. But all that changed with the war, and particularly after the end of the war, a new reality set in. And this was something that he likely felt humiliated by. And similarly, Hitler also felt humiliated by the experience of his post-war experience in Vienna. After the First World War, Hitler returned to Vienna, a sort of a broken man living in homeless shelters, one of which was actually sponsored by the Masonic lodge that Karl Popper's dad was a grandmaster of. So there's interesting links there by the Jewish Popper running a lodge for homeless men that Hitler was staying in, which I think is interesting. But this was almost a universal sense of humiliation, purposelessness. For Hitler, this fed into his pathologies, but for others, this just led to a sense of demoralization, which is something like what happened to Kafka, and something I think that it's a clue. That photo of him in his uniform is a clue to his, the symbolism or the metaphor of the transformation. Keep in mind, we need to read this book in two ways. That the Metamorphosis is one; it's very literal in a magic realist sense. And then it's also metaphorical readings that we have to do as well. So we can't discount both readings. They play into each other. They're crucial to each other. Okay, the Samsa family was similarly experienced humiliation owing to Gregor's humiliation. Towards the end of the story, we see that humiliation. First, it starts with Gregor being humiliated. Then, towards the end of the family, when Gregor, as he can no longer work owing to his status as a rodent or insect, or whatever that monstrous beast is, that vermin. It's never really described. We don't know exactly what type of vermin it is. It's just described as vermin. But likely it's depicted as looking cockroach-like. Anyway, as a result of this, the family's financial situations deteriorate. This is something of the sense that they took his income as small as it was for granted. The dad has to go back to work in a very menial, degrading job. The family has to take in boarders, traveling boarders, and a sense of humiliation that the dad has a long job, serving tea breaks to other men in a company or whatever, opening doors and that kind of thing. Has to go home and he can't even sit down at his own chair because the boarders in the house are sitting there and the family stand around while they're sitting down eating the meal that the mum produced. So there's a sense of humiliation for the whole family. So this was a product of Gregor's transformation. It was a product of it. It caused a certain alienation. So the metaphor of the transformation, in a sense, is a psychological realization or adaptation to the new realities. And I think that's something a lot of people at the moment understand. We have to adapt to the new situation of COVID-19. That's required a lot of people to adapt to new realities, new situations. So the psychological coming to terms with this. Gregor starts to cognize more like an insect, which I think is interesting. he becomes less human. Indeed, by the end of the novel, he's no longer human at all. The basic cognitive thought functions aren't there anymore. At the beginning they were. There's a sense that there's a human stuck in an insect's body. By the end of it, there was no human there. It was just insect. It was just vermin. Or just a creature, whatever. So there is a transformation going on there. Unbecoming of Gregor. So he's no longer there, so then the logic is from his family, well, it's alright to, it would be good if he was gone, it would be good if he was dead, because it's no longer Gregor. We can see this in his sister when she eventually says, we have to try and get rid of it. The term here, it. So it's no longer him, it's no longer Gregor, they're speaking of it as it. So once she utters that, the realization of his transformation, of his no longer being Gregor, of his unbecoming of Gregor, is fully realized. It's kind of like a Tolstoy novel. Things need to be said aloud at times. I mean, there can be a psychological realization of something, but until someone utters certain terms, then by uttering the term, you make it real. So yes, we adapt ourselves to our surroundings, to our humiliations and demands of our immediate circumstances. Okay, finally. In the end, even Gregor's family turn on him. This speaks to something of the sense of alienation, the instrumental rationality of modern societies, in which the Hungarian Jewish Marxist philosopher of a similar period, Lukács, said, commodifies everything. Even life itself becomes commodified and expendable. So I think it's interesting reading Kafka here in light of Lukács, and the idea that not only we commodify things, objects, even people, ultimately humans become commodified and expendable products. I think we see a lot of this going on during COVID. This brings out the extent to which humans are commodified and expendable, both in major layoffs going on at the moment in various sectors, in the nursing homes. The situation there, I think, speaks for itself. And only when Gregor the insect is gone does his family's situation improve. He became a burden to be rid of. So this is kind of part of one of the most disturbing aspects of the novel. That there's kind of only light and optimism returns to the family after Gregor's gone. And this for me is Kafka's attempt to try and emphasize what it means to be commodified, for individual to be commodified, to be utterly alienated, even from their own family, to be utterly expendable from their own family. And this is a tendency in modern societies, particularly neoliberal societies, this individual as expendable. And the implications of that for the family, breaking down the family unit, turning family members against each other, all for individual sort of the myth of an individual's getting ahead or individual success. The idea that the individual can go it alone, and that all other individuals around them are kind of resources for their getting ahead. This is, I think, being critical of this idea, that there is no society, that are only individuals tearing each other apart to get ahead. This Thatcherite idea. This is something I think the story of the Metamorphosis is critical of. In a way, through. So, the absurd fantasy of this story is used to reveal actual psychological realities or facts of our psychological experience. And I think this is an important point. The magic realist and absurdist stories, fiction, the point of them is that they are not unreal just because there's fantasy all through them, that they reveal psychological realities, realities and truths that are not manifest, but that we experience as real and affect us as real, and that change the world around us, as Popper would say, as world 2 interacts with world 3 and world 2 interact with the physical, social world, with world 1. So what Kafka is trying to get at here is are psychological facts of experience and psychological realities and social realities and the social pathologies that sort of interact with them. And there's interaction between the social pathologies and the personal psychology and the personal pathologies and the social psychology. So this is something that's explored in Kafka's work, particularly his Metamorphosis. Thank you.